without facts. Fact is fiction, and fiction is fact. It will get ugly. Pro-pagan Da no longer works too well. Those that shout the loudest are those who have much to cover up themselves. Transparency will always override secrecy and pseudonyms. Truth shines through no matter how long it takes. Critiques are in the millions. Whether awake or asleep, there really is no difference. Those actually doing the work are the few. Those that target others are actually targeting themselves. Envy, like bitterness, is a terrible disease. Pointing fingers away from you never solved anything. Ain't it always a coincidence that those who critique are not in the state or country groups or contributing to the People's Club? And the question remains is, what are you doing for humanity? I guess our show is having a big impact, and it bothers some, inside and outside of the group, mainly those who haven't done an ounce of their own work. Our show and host will go on having a big impact in making this world a better place to live, not exist on. To much chagrin from the weak, unhinged and underdeveloped children that reside in adult bodies. Hi all, and here we go with another Thursday special. We've got a few hammers lined up tonight. And tonight's show will have a plethora of confirmations that were put out previously by this show. Big investigations, corruptions being exposed now, and the programmes that were ran on us also exposed now and will be there for all to see. Like I said, the impact this show is having now is enormous and also encouraging, and which is why the old system people attack it. And it's a massive win for the alt media, despite it being littered with agency-based trolls and narratives, that the media is now covering our stories and wasting vast amounts of energy, resources and time trying to spin it back into their favour. Except it's not working, and it's making them look more stupid than they actually are. Or maybe they just are that way, who knows. They've lost the narrative, and they resort to their statements with no facts tactic, but it's not working too well either now. Oops. So tonight's show will be like a From Russia with Love show mixed with Clowns in Panic, and so many confirms. Right, we're going to get into a few pieces before we go into the news, which is kind of the bulk of this show tonight, because it's given confirms of what's really going on and what's happening in the world. But this week I did the TPC, the People's Club introduction video, which is now up on the peoplesclub.org website, and I hope you all enjoyed it, and you are encouraged to share it far and wide. Now, as for the donations, they are accepted via the thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org site, which is our website, or via the PayPal with the email address of tgwusauk@hotmail.com. Now, I want to say a big thank you again to you all who have contributed to the People's Club, including to the person with the large donation today. Thank you very much. It's much appreciated. Now, what this is is an investment into humanity. It's an opportunity to look after ourselves, an opportunity to improve people's lives. And if people wish to critique it, then fine, because it says more about them than it does about us or me. Part 2 will be explaining the cooperative business model, and that will follow shortly. It's almost ready. And when that comes out, I would like all state and country groups to play that video on their Zoom calls and discuss it and come up with ideas amongst yourselves on how to widen out the $1 or more effort. It's going very well. And perhaps also in your calls, you can give a slight nudge to some people who maybe haven't signed up for the automatic payments or contributed to the People's Club yet. We're starting off from within, and then we're hoping to expand out. The THI members have put more than enough in, and it's up to us to go and speak to our friends and family and wider circle and get them to get on board. Everyone can afford $1 a month at least. And like I said, it's an investment into humanity. That's where the money's going to be going. And part 2, when it comes out, it may be this week, will be something I need all of you to absorb and grasp, as that will be then your responsibility to teach the information within that show to the wider masses when the time is right. Small reminder to listeners in the THI state and country groups: you must be in the group of the state or country you reside in, and it's up to the leaders of the group and the admins to ensure that each member is from that state or country. It is important, because when funding comes out, members will be asked to validate their residency to the leader of their group. Anyone found in the wrong group at that point will be removed from the funding process. It is important to adhere to going forward. We've made only a very few rules with regards to the groups, but this one is essential. So I'm asking the leaders to please double check your members list and remove those not residing there, even if you are friends. The gist of these groups is you are a representative for your state or country. Remember that. This is not a social group setting. This is a business and humanity restoration setting. How can you claim funding when you don't reside in that state or country? I'd also like to ask listeners and members to please stop requesting our admins, can you move to another state or group? Like I said, it's not allowed. And a further request to ask members to stop asking me, or in particular Holly and Ramona, and Michelle or James, for them to discuss or review your ideas or projects. All of us do this in our free time, of which mine is particularly limited. This is why we set up your state and country groups. That's what it's for you to discuss ideas, build your projects, and coming up with proposals amongst each other that's going to help your state and country. When you get to the proposal stage, that should not be sent to the email. That should only be sent to the peoplesclub.org website. You will receive an acknowledging email, and then you will not hear back from us until funding is in place, full funding that is. For those who are new and you are setting up a new group, It is one per state and one per country as it stands. But please check your Facebook or MeWe by searching for THI dash and the name of the state or the country first, not just ask the admins to do it for you. You know, your group must have THI dash and then the name of the title of your group. This is for ease of searching. Your group needs to have the guidelines posted in your group files, and your group must be registered with either Holly or Ramona and then entered into the database file to be recognised as an official THI group. Those not registered will be discounted when funding arrives. Now some will say, well, that's a bit harsh. Well, no, because you have had 9 months now to get your groups in order. And sometimes it kind of disturbs me the amount of time people are pulling on Holly and Ramona or myself with basic questions regarding the groups at this point. So I hope that clears some things up. But once again, I want to say thanks to all who have donated to the People's Club. It is up. We had a record month last month. I think it was $2,500 for the month. And we're 50% up on that with still 9 days to go for this month. Great stuff. Really pleases me, that. Right, let's get into the news. Like I said, there's an awful lot of reveals in this, and a sign of change. President Trump said he's not happy with the White House aide who is expected to be removed after he testified in the impeachment hearings. You'll hear more about that. A Twitter exchange between Trump and other people, which I came across, and it led to an exchange about the issue of thousands of dead people voting Democrat. And words kind of flowed back and forth, and then one person said, "Dead people don't vote, Charles." So I'm not sure what point you are trying to make. As they say, our members will know. Ignorance is a choice. All people who vote are already declared dead, which is why your names are all in capital letters. And that's something that we have to correct going forward. The capital letters should only be at the front, not all uppercase. That means you are dead, or they think you are dead. And then we found out this piece. As of yesterday, the oldest man in the world was confirmed to be 112 years old and 344 days. And he lives in Niigata in Japan. So please explain how Michigan can have someone on their voter rolls born in 1823. Making them 84 years older than the oldest man in the world. It's not just Michigan either. Here's a pleasing story which runs alongside of what we're trying to do with the People's Club on a wider basis. But it's not every day that a new boss flies in and gives his employees the stunning news that they're getting an instant raise to meet a $50,000 minimum salary. But kudos to Gravity Payments CEO Dan Price. And Price, who owns the Seattle-based payment processing company, famously slashed his $1 million salary back in 2015 to give all his employees a minimum $70,000 salary. Now, most employees at the company were making under $30,000 according to Price, and as part of the deal, he committed to immediately raising the minimum salary up to $50,000, offering many employees a significant pay bump, and he also gave employees a $5,000 raise each year, which then culminated in a $70,000 annual salary by 2024. And Price said he was inspired to start the minimum income experiment after he had read an article that detailed how more money can make a crucial difference in fostering happiness in the lives of people that are making less than $70,000. Good stuff. Now comes the pain. Oh dear. They're getting exposed. First of many tonight. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow has been pushing unfounded and salacious conspiracy theories for years now about President Trump and also the Republicans. Of course, Miss Maddow made herself the queen of fake news after she dedicated 2 years of her show to falsely claim to her viewers there's evidence that Trump colluded with Russia to win the 2016 election, which failed. But her lies have now finally caught up with her, and a few months ago, when the conservative network One America News Network smacked her with a cease and desist letter. Maddow is now in court trying to defend herself with legal help from Comcast and MSNBC, because she's now being sued for $10 million for claiming a OANN reporter is a Russian asset trying to subvert America and help Trump. And she said, we literally learned today that outlet that the president is promoting shares staff with the Kremlin. And she went on, I mean what? It's an easy thing to throw out. Hey, that looks like Russian propaganda. And she said the most pro-Trump right-wing news outlet in America really, literally is paid Russian propaganda. Oh dear. Statements, not facts. Again, Miss Maddow. Apple have been fined €25 million, which is about $27 million, for deliberately slowing down older iPhone models without making it clear to consumers. The fine was imposed by France's competition and fraud watchdog, which said consumers were not warned. Now, back in 2017, Apple confirmed that it did slow down some iPhones. Try all. And they're lying when they said that they did so to prolong the life of the devices. They've been reading Langley scripts again. And Apple said in a statement that it had resolved the issue with the watchdog, and many customers had long suspected that Apple slowed down the older iPhones to encourage people to upgrade when a new one was released. Of course they did. And the company confirmed it did slow down some models as they aged, but not to encourage people to upgrade. Yeah, right. And it said that the lithium-ion batteries in the devices became less capable of supplying peak current demands as they aged over time. And that could result in an iPhone unexpectedly shutting down to protect its electronic components. And so they said it released a software update for the iPhone 6, iPhone 6S and the iPhone SE, which smoothed out battery performance. Well, we've warned about this and technology and the fun and games many times on our show. But this is essentially what they do. And the danger of the technology with chips. You know, it's like Mission Impossible. This message or this phone or this TV or this car will blow up 5 seconds after the warranty. Like it always does. You know, that's again needs to be addressed. So that type of corporate skullduggery has to be stopped. You know, you buy an item, you should expect it to last a few years, particularly technology. It should last an awful lot longer, not buy a new one every 18 months, 2 years. No need for it. You know, and as an example, how many, when we used to have the dial on the wall, how many times did you buy a new one of them? Did they break? No. So what's the difference? You know, they tell you that technology is advancing forwards. Not when it's breaking every 18 months, it isn't. That's regressing. Oh dear, the next one. Oh dear. The World Horror Organization has warned that trolls and conspiracy theories are undermining their response to the new coronavirus. The World Horror Organization Director, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, told reporters that misinformation was making the work of our heroic workers even harder. Good. More than 34,800 people have allegedly been infected by the new coronavirus worldwide, the vast majority in China. And they said, when I pulled this report, that 723 deaths in China and 1 death abroad in the Philippines. And of the 34,500 people infected within China, Dr. Tedros said almost 25,000 are in the Hubei province, the region where the outbreak was first reported, which has since become the epicenter of the virus. And he said, I would also like to speak briefly about the importance of facts, not fear. Oh dear, the World Health Organization talking about facts and not fear. Really? And people must have access to accurate information, indeed, to protect themselves and others, yes, from the World Health Organization. And he said misinformation around the new strain 2019 nCoV causes confusion and spreads fear to the general public. Oh my, the efforts they're going to spin things now. And he said, at the World Health Organization, we're not just battling the virus, we're also battling the trolls and conspiracy theorists that undermine our response. No, you are battling losing your fake narrative is what you're battling. You've lost the narrative. That won't be the first of tonight's show. The IMF director, Kristalina Georgiev, made her first major personnel move since taking over the institution last October, and announcing that her top deputy, David Lipton, will leave at the end of February. And the IMF said Lipton's departure as first deputy managing director was in the context of changes she will be making to the leadership team. Now, Lipton, a 66-year-old American economist, had held the position since September 2011, longer than any other first deputy managing director. But his departure comes 19 months before his official term expires in September 2021. Now, Mr. Lipton was often critical of President Donald Trump's trade policies and tariff actions. Well, he would, because at the IMF were creaming funds off countries as part of those tariffs. And Lipton began his professional career as an economist at the IMF in 1981, allegedly working to stabilise poor countries. Stabilise must have a completely different meaning and context, because all I've seen is them raping and pillaging poor countries, as we saw in Liberia last year with the Trust and many other African countries. And he also served as the US Treasury's Under-Secretary for International Affairs, no surprise, from 1993 to 1998 under Bill Clinton. Later worked in the private sector finance, and Deputy Managing Director Carla Grasso, who was in charge of administration, will also leave, spelled F-I-R-E-D, at the end of February. The whole gist of that is musical chairs because things are not going according to plan. Oh my. The US has charged 4 Chinese military officers over the huge cyber attack on credit rating giant Equifax. More than 147 million Americans were affected in 2017 when hackers stole sensitive personal data, including names and addresses. The reason being is there were so many backdoors. Virtually anyone could have got in to any system. And this is some of the work that Kim, and to a lesser degree myself, has been involved in, shutting these backdoors off. You know, there was 36,000 backdoors into banks alone. 36,000. You know, I think it was the Clowns in Panic show I mentioned about where's the national security when you've got all these agencies, the Five Eyes or Zero Eyes, all sending each other data right out of the country. The militaries sharing data out of the country to Israel, who then sell it to China. And yet no one asks, what about the national security issue for America and Americans? How all our cable and internet are all ran by foreign companies, all collecting data. Again, you ask, where is the National Security Act? Well, we all know where it is, and we'll know why it was set up, and we'll reference that later. But not only Americans were affected, but some UK and Canadian customers were also affected. Now, announcing the indictments, Attorney General William Barr called the hack one of the largest data breaches in history. And according to court documents, the 4 are allegedly members of the People's Liberation Army's 54th Research Institute, which is a component of the Chinese military. And they spent weeks in the company's system, breaking into the security networks and stealing personal data, according to the documents. And the 9-count indictment also accuses the group of stealing trade secrets, including data compilation and database designs. They didn't have to. Was virtually all the data coming out of America, Palo Alto, Langley and NSA was shared right round the world. Oops. Now, the whereabouts of the suspects is unknown, and it is highly unlikely that they will stand trial in the US. But the FBI Deputy Director David Bowditch said, "We can't take them into custody, try them in a court of law and lock them up. Not today anyway." As a reference to this, Do you remember this piece I did in an earlier show of military involvement on the internet? Now it's all being uncovered. The senior Twitter executive with editorial responsibility for the Middle East is also a part-time officer in the British Army's Psychological Warfare Unit. Middle East Eye was established. Now, Gordon Macmillan, Twitter's head of editorial for Europe, the Middle East and Africa, not only works for the British government, but is also a reservist in the 77th Brigade in the UK. And in case you don't know what the 77th Brigade is, it is a counter-intelligence unit set up to combat disinformation, that's a laugh, on social media. And they spread pro-Western propaganda on Twitter and Facebook. Now, that particular unit was announced in 2015 in response, you can imagine, to a series of losses on the information war front, mainly over Syria and Ukraine. But it's not just there. They are losing information war on all levels. All that information was being passed to them by people within this country. And yes, you can blame, those nasty Chinese hackers. They don't have to hack. That's what we found out when we went into all the systems. They didn't have to hack anything. It was all accessible. Bank records, credit records, medical records, you name it. Military secrets, so-called military secrets. It was all open. So citing them for hacking is not really, that's the effect. You have to deal with the cause, and the cause is on our own soil. Another one who's finally coming up and facing justice. Sudan's rulers have agreed to hand over the ex-president Omar al-Bashir to the International Criminal Court to face genocide and war crimes charges. Bashir is accused of serious crimes in a conflict that broke out in Darfur in 2003 and led to the deaths of 300,000 people. Authorities said the former president and others charged by the ICC would appear at The Hague to face a tribunal, and the commitment came at peace talks between Sudan's government and the rebel groups from the Darfur region. Justice cannot be achieved if we don't heal the wounds, said Mohammed Hassan al-Taishi, who is a spokesman for the Sudanese government. Good stuff. Here's more fake news. The number of US troops suffering from traumatic brain injuries after an Iranian attack on a US base in Iraq in January has now risen to 109, according to US officials. Now, the figure is a significant increase from the 64 injured service members previously reported by the Pentagon. President Trump initially said no Americans were injured in the raid, which is actually correct. And the attack on the January the 8th came amid tensions over the US killing of an Iranian general. And the fake news said nearly 70% of the injured service members have returned to their duties. And according to the Pentagon anyway. That whole story is pro-pagan dark piece brought to you by deep state clowns wanting to escalate war. Failed again. This is interesting. Again, it comes up with the Clowns in Panic show. And also elements of the From Russia with Love show. Yet again, the heat has been turned on those who play games that shouldn't be doing it. The US has launched investigations into Harvard and Yale universities over suspicions they received undisclosed funds from foreign countries including Saudi Arabia and China. Go figure. The US Department of Education said the elite schools did not fully report hundreds of millions of dollars in foreign gifts and contracts. Now, Harvard and Yale told the BBC they were preparing responses for the government, and it comes amid a clampdown on foreign funding into academic institutions. Now, under US law, universities are required to report all gifts and contracts from foreign sources that exceed $250,000. Should be all of it. If you're talking about protecting your own borders, why is it $250,000? It's all about the flow of the money, you see. Now, since July, the Department of Education said it has uncovered some $6.6 billion in previously unreported gifts from countries including Qatar, China, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. 6.6 billion. Imagine the tax on that. They're not paying. Also, the question is, why are they covering it up? But it's also said that that figure could be significantly underestimated. 6.6 billion underestimated. And officials have previously described the foreign spending on US universities as a black hole, black projects, and warned that such money can come with strings attached. It always does. And this is about transparency. Ooh. People don't like transparency. If colleges and universities are accepting foreign money and gifts, their students, donors and taxpayers deserve to know how much and who it's coming from, according to the US Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos. Unfortunately, she said, the more we dig, the more we find that too many are underreporting or not reporting at all, she said. And the Department of Education said Yale University had chosen to not report any foreign funding for the last 4 years. And that pretty much coincides with Trump getting in. How interesting. And is suspected of failing to disclose at least $375 million in foreign gifts and contracts. The agency said it was also concerned that Harvard lacked appropriate institutional controls over foreign money and had failed to fully report foreign gifts and contracts. And earlier this month, the chairman of Harvard Chemistry Department and 2 Chinese researchers were charged with making false statements about ties to the Chinese government. Well. It's not ties to the Chinese government, I might add. It's ties to the clowns and the dragon groups, not the Chinese government. They'll blame the Chinese government for everything. It's these hidden deep state elements. It's getting fun now, isn't it? Harvard and Yale being investigated. Oh my. Who'd have thought we'd ever hear that? There's a lot deeper issue going on over education. I think there's a piece later about it. Right, where are we next? And this is another thing I never thought I'd see either. But it's now coming off. The UN Human Rights Office has issued a long-awaited report on companies that are linked to Jewish settlements in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. And the report names 112 business entities the office says it has reasonable grounds to conclude have been involved in activities that were related to the settlements. These companies include Airbnb, Booking.com, Expedia Group and Motorola Solutions, amongst others. Now, the Palestinians said the report was a victory for international law, but Israel predictably called it shameful. Now, about 600,000 Jewish people live in about 140 settlements that have been built since Israel's occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem in 1967. And the settlements are widely considered illegal. Not considered, they are, under international law, though Israel has always disputed this. Now, the Palestinians have long called for the removal of the settlements, arguing that their presence on land they claim for a future independent Palestinian state makes it almost impossible to make such a state a reality. Well, Mr. Trump unveiled a peace plan recently, last month, that may pave the way for Israel annexing the settlements, which is not a good move. And in an address to the UN Security Council last Tuesday, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas reiterated his rejection of Mr. Trump's plan, describing the proposed Palestinian state as looking like a Swiss cheese. Interesting terminology, that Swiss cheese. Do I smell the flavour of Rothschilds? Here's another good news story. Had enough of these stupid people, ignorant beyond all basic common sense. The 64 white supremacists have been sentenced to a combined total of 820 years imprisonment in what is believed to be the largest collective prosecution of white supremacists in the United States, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Texas. Now, on Thursday, Gary Cody Jones, who was 51, was sentenced to over 11 years in prison for his role in a drug-dealing scheme, marking the 64th and final hearing in the second round of sentencing for a series of kidnapping and drug-related conspiracies involving hate groups. Jones's lawyer did not return a request for comment, but the U.S. Attorney Erin Neely Cox said in a press release, "Not only do white supremacist gangs endorse repugnant ideologies, they also facilitate a violent drug and gun trade, putting our citizens in grave danger. We were alarmed, but not necessarily surprised at the quantities of drugs and firearms recovered during this investigation. And the U.S. Attorney Office is committed to working with our law enforcement partners to dismantle these organisations, disrupt their criminal activities and put their members behind bars." Now, other defendants were charged with offences ranging from threats to violent assaults, and in one instance a suspected neo-Nazi has attempted to run over police officers during his arrest. Bye-bye to them. Don't need them. Another sign of the times that we did warn of. HSBC has said it will axe around 35,000 jobs as it announced profits for 2019 fell by a third. It was a little bit more than that. That has spurred the bank to target $4.5 billion of cost cuts by 2022 as part of a major restructuring. And the bank's interim chief executive, Noel Quinn, said HSBC would scale back its headcount from 235,000 to about 200,000 over the next 3 years. Now, HSBC, which makes the bulk of its revenue in Asia, no surprise, they are the main money laundering bank for Asia, and that's where the bulk of its revenue comes from, except now it's being cut off. Oops, or large portions of it anyway. And they reported annual profit before tax of 13.35 billion, most of it obtained via the opium trade. Yes, same dragon groups again. And it said the fall in profits was mainly down to a 7.3 billion in write-offs related to its investment and commercial banking operations in Europe. Yes, because HSBC was going to become the main bank in Asia when they transferred from Federal Reserve West in America to Federal Reserve East in Beijing. But it didn't happen, did it? And the 35,000 job losses are deeper than expected and represent about 15% of the workforce. And analysts had expected about 10,000 jobs to be cut, not 35,000. And this is has been replicated. We've mentioned a number of banks now and massive job cuts, and it's indicative and what we warned about would happen. And it won't be 35,000 either. Try 135,000. Because whilst they all sit back and wait for orders from the Rothschilds and the Black Sun groups, the Titanic is sinking. You know, lifeboats are all ready. They're all there. They're all ready. But they just follow orders towards their own demise. Like I said, one day you will all have to come to us on an equal level before your whole business collapses around you. This has been bubbling under the surface and is now being outed. Again, we never thought we would hear this so many years ago, or even as far as last year. And a further sign that things are really taking place now. Tel Aviv. There was a tense waiting for Jimmy Julius Carrao to appear in court. And he is a wanted man and also considered dangerous, accused of sexually assaulting a 9-year-old girl in Oregon in 2000. He fled to Israel before authorities in the US could apprehend him or figure out where he went. Carrao has been running from US law enforcement ever since. Now currently Interpol, an intergovernmental policing organisation that works with 194 countries, has a red notice to alert police worldwide that he is a fugitive. Now, 2 years after he fled the US, Carrao was convicted by an Israeli court of child molestation in a separate case, and he served time and was released. And now another alleged Israeli victim has come forward saying he was abusing her when she was 5 years old and continued for years. Now there's been a news investigation into it has found that many, and this was CBS, has found that many accused American pedophiles all flee to Israel, as bringing them to justice there can be difficult. So much for the Allies then. The Jewish Community Watch, which is an American organisation that tracks accused pedophiles, has been trying for years to find Carrao and help bring him to justice. The Jewish Community Watch says Caro and other wanted men and women have been able to exploit a right known as the law of return, whereby any Jewish person can move to Israel and automatically gain citizenship and subsequently get free of being arrested. Why would that country have those laws? I thought it was God's country. Really think God would allow that type of behaviour in that country? But kudos to the Jewish Community Watch people, which is a small organisation that started tracking accused pedophiles in 2014, and it says more than 60 have fled from the US to Israel to avoid prosecution. And given its limited resources to identify these criminals, the Jewish Community Watch says the actual number is likely much larger. And the founder of JCW, Maya Seewald, said the same thing is going on in the Catholic Church right now around the world. The exact same thing is happening in our own community. The cover-ups are the same, the stigma, the shame. And Seewald said the tightly knit Jewish communities across the US will sometimes meet accusations against a member with incredulity, and that can have a chilling effect. Everyone goes and surrounds this individual and supports him because they can't believe a person can do such a crime. They take the abuser's side and the abuse continues. So it's not only the country of Israel protecting these pedophiles, but also the Jewish communities. And JCW says the majority of its cases originate from modern Orthodox to ultra-Orthodox Jewish enclaves in the US, but that it happens across the wider Jewish community because perpetrators can't be held accountable unless witnesses come forward, and many cases are believed to go unreported. To try to get them out into the light, JCW hold awareness events across the US and offers victims of sexual abuse advice and also emotional support. Now, JCW tracked them down and confronted Caro in Jerusalem with a hidden camera, and Yom Tov admitted that he had violated his probation and illegally fled the United States with help. Who is helping him? These people. And he also said that in Mexico he obtained a fake passport in order to travel to Israel, where he lives illegally. Jewish communities protecting pedophiles. Epstein, anyone? Big kudos to Maya Seewald, who is Jewish and part of the Jewish Community Watch, for being brave enough to stand up to these criminals. It doesn't matter which religion they are. I suppose it hurts a bit more when it's in your own community. Well, criminal's criminal. So kudos to Mr. Seewald. Here's another story we never thought we'd hear either. Like I said, I told you there'd be a lot of confirms tonight, and this is the final before we have a music break. Switzerland said it is investigating a report that the CIA and Germany's intelligence agency used a Swiss firm's encryption technology to spy on more than 100 nations. Oops. The company Crypto AG was the dominant maker of encryption devices for decades, and none of the countries that bought the equipment knew that it was being run by the CIA in a secret partnership with West German intelligence. Oh boy. Clans in panic? Data mining? Bitcoin? Oops. The spy agencies rigged the devices so they could easily read the encrypted messages. That confirms what we said in our show several times of who created the encryption. Oh, you should get an encrypted email, Thomas. No, they can spy on everything. There's no encrypted. Just didn't. They created it, like the cryptos. The CIA and the NSA created cryptos. Bitcoin. Why? To collect data and sell fresh air tokens to stupid people. You know? But they also put backdoors in it. And those backdoors then go into your phone where you have your Bitcoin wallet, and it's using your phone not only to spy on you, but it's using your phone as a battery to fund their program. Metadata. This is why Robert David Steele said, asked for $4.5 billion, I think it was, to provide phones to all the billions of people that haven't got one. And everyone thinks, oh, isn't he nice? No. What they want is everyone on phones so they can track everyone, but also use the battery power of the phone to create these metadata fresh air coins, which they control. It's all there. Told you it all comes out eventually. Now, the Washington Post detailed the partnership and the company's history in a lengthy piece that was published last Tuesday, and the Swiss Defense Ministry then said it is scrutinizing crypto's activities to investigate and clarify the facts of the matter. Now, the events under discussion date back as far back to 1945. I told you we'd gone on a long time, and are difficult to reconstruct and interpret in the present-day context. Now, a classified CIA report on the decades-long operation refers to it as the intelligence coup of the century, because it allowed the intelligence services to read top-secret messages of dozens of countries, including during times of crises, largely of which they created. But 1945, the CIA didn't exist. It was the OSS. Like I said, From Russia with Love 7 reveals most of this. All the same group. OSS being the operative letters. The German intelligence agency left the partnership in the early 1990s after years of tension over money and the Americans' willingness to spy on some of their allies. And the CIA are said to have sold off the company's assets in 2018, creating two successor companies, Crypto International and Psi-One Security AG. Remember in From Russia with Love 7 and also Clowns in Panic about they create these side companies, of which Robert David Steele and Open Source is one of them. This is what they do, so it makes that the CIA is not involved when actually they are, because they control who they place in those companies and run them privately. No government oversight then, you see. Not that they have much government oversight already, because they just pull the National Security Act, we can't tell you any information because it comes under the National Security Act. That's how it works. So if the Swiss authorities allowed the operation, crypto may not have violated the country's laws that limit unwelcome espionage activities by foreign agents. However, the Swiss politician Balthasar Glietli said if the country knew about crypto's activities, it would undermine the foundations of our political identity. Now, the Crypto International owner, Andreas Linde, called the report distressing, really, and said his company had no connections to the CIA or German intelligence. Yeah, pull the other one, it's got balls on. Now, as for Saiwan Security, said it also had nothing to do with the spy services. Wasn't me. It was him over there. And the Swiss Economy Minister, Guy Parmelin, suspended the general export licenses of both companies until the situation and open questions have been clarified. Clowns in panic show. Oops. I hope you enjoyed that news. We'll be back shortly. Hi all and welcome back. It was probably the most explosive news section of any THI show. The revelations and investigations into stuff that we've covered in great detail is pleasing. Right, here's another piece that I pulled up that kind of details the way people pass off opinion on politics and how they're losing the narrative badly and focusing on the drama and not the policies. And it says, a new decade in American politics has started with a hangover that keeps on getting worse. A quickening of the downward democratic spiral we have witnessed over the past 30 years. So much of what has gone awry has been resident in the trial of Donald Trump and the partisan vitriol, the degradation of debate, the use of what were previously rarely used weapons, in this instance impeachment, to escalate America's ceaseless political war. This sorry saga has offered yet more proof that far from being an aberration, the Trump era is a culmination. The hyper-partisanship of Republicans and Democrats has been evident in the party line votes to impeach and acquit, but the coarseness and ugliness of political discourse we have heard every day, which prompted the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and deep state clown John Roberts to tell both sides to dial back the rhetoric. Again, we've witnessed the negative statecraft of Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who used parliamentary procedures, it is stated, to bar witnesses from even appearing in the trial. A case historians may well conclude of jurors actively obstructing justice. Not exactly. McConnell managed to block Barack Obama's final Supreme Court nominee, Merrick Garland, for almost a year, and rightly so, in preventing the Democratic House managers from calling witnesses such as the former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, really. Of course, he's impartial, who could, according to this report, completely blown up in the president's defence. I don't think so. Now, in their rush to impeach Mr. Trump, the Democrats also decided not to fight a lengthy court battle for the right to hear testimony from Bolton and other White House aides. This opened them up to criticism that the process was a naked political play rather than a grave constitutional undertaking. That is an interesting piece in many ways. and a first sign of media discontent of how politics plays out. It should not be, well, it won't be lost on our members and many others in the alt media that the media are also responsible for much of the theatre as well, twisting words and sentences to make people look bad, highlighting non-important issues and never ever focusing on the policies, which is what politics is supposed to be all about. It's all drama, drama and drama. Theatre. But it's interesting that some of the media are now, maybe they're getting a bit worried, who knows. Here's another spin that they tried this week. A doctor who took his own life in Chicago, and the media used it to spin for vaccines. The lengths they will go is getting embarrassing now. Now, according to authorities, the doctor left a note suggesting he had become averse to vaccinations and may have falsified records. So the doctor has decided he doesn't think vaccinations work, but look, listen how they twist it. The Dr. Van Coynes may have left children unvaccinated, according to the Cook County Sheriff's Office. Van Coynes expressed regret for his actions, but his note was ambiguous. Officials are investigating if the much-loved paediatrician forged records so that anti-vaccination parents could obtain documents required for schools. Dr. Coynes reportedly wrote that he had become averse to immunisation in his last decade of work. And, quote, he was incredibly regretful for what he did, and it was the only thing he mentioned in the suicide note, according to the authorities. Those people often write that. On the one hand, he said he's averse to vaccinations, and next minute he's saying he regrets it. I don't think so. And the fact that the county sheriff said that the note was, quote, cryptic. So because it's cryptic, it was actually quite clear when he said he became averse to vaccinations. That's not cryptic, that's fact. It's only what they were spinning that's cryptic, that he regrets it. No, he doesn't. Because clearly he'd been doing it for the last decade, refusing to immunise children. And what's his name? Tom Dart. Perhaps he's had too many darts in his head, I think. Told the US media that the biggest issue is parents who are under the impression that children are immunised when they're not. But I thought he said earlier that the doctor was helping the anti-vaccination parents to obtain documents. So clearly the parents already knew. Let's see how they do it. It looks ridiculous. So the doctor commits suicide and then writes a note of his anti-vaccine stance. The media and the police pick it up and twist it into something it's not. And that's what happens when you lose the information war. They are left to twist and spin things, and that is a massive win for us. Massive. Speaking of vaccines, the Wuhan coronavirus outbreak that began in December 2019, which happened in the city of Wuhan, which houses the only Chinese biosafety level 4 facility. Coincidence? I think not. But they quoted when I wrote this, and this is important, as the piece after this will be just as important. Again, it's how they are trying to twist things with no proof, statements without facts. They said that 1,000 people had died, but where's their proof? Why doesn't the alt media attack the media and ask them to show the proof to support their statements? Why do people automatically accept what they're saying when there is no evidence supporting what they are saying? None. It's a statement. Statements are not facts. So stating that 1,000 plus, it's up to 1,700 now, are dead does not mean 1,700 people have died from that alleged disease. People just accept it as fact with no evidence. And given most of the reports on that disease are coming from Thomson Reuters, which is run by the CIA, do we really need to believe that? Should we? Their past record says not. Even the stuff we've covered tonight in this show shows you that. The only thing I'm amazed at is, given that China is so close to another certain country, I'm amazed they haven't blamed the Russians yet for that. Doing everything else. And here is another mainstream media statement, again with zero evidence to support it. Remember, we did the piece about 11,000 scientists, which is actually about less than 1% of global scientists, on climate change recently. This is the same script. We just changed the parameters. More than 2,000 former Department of Justice officials are calling on Attorney General William Barr to resign, according to a group called Protect Democracy. Well, for one, America is not a democracy. Hello? And they said political interference in the conduct of a criminal prosecution is anathema to the department's core mission. Oh, really? And covering up democratic crimes is not flavour of the day, is it? And according to them, and its sacred obligation to ensure equal justice under the law. Oh my. From the Justice Department? It's the same Justice Department that's been lying and falsifying all kinds of papers for the last numbers of decades. But now, all of a sudden, we have to play by the rules. Really? Now, this non-partisan, which is generally means deep state clown. The minute you hear non-partisan, it means deep state clown. So-called non-profit group, which then becomes debatable, said the Attorney General has flouted that fundamental principle. What about Obama? What about Pelosi? What about Comey? What about Strzok? What about Page? What about Clinton? And they said the former DOJ officials, since when were they an authority to pass comment, to steer an opinion? That it's outrageous the way Barr interfered in the Roger Stone case. So it's outrageous that Mr. Stone got 9 years jail for lying to Congress when the whole of Congress is lying to the American people on a daily basis. 2,000. Where's that evidence to support that? And who are these 2,000? And who are this Protect Democracy group that is clearly not American, because we're not a democracy? Of course, where are we next? Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, fired from the National Security Council, and apparently is leaving for the Pentagon, according to sources. But the President also denied reports that his acting Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, was also for the chopping block. Now, Mr. Trump is said to desire a staff shake-up. Take note of that. After senators cleared them in the impeachment case on Wednesday of last week. Alexander Semyon Vindman and his identical twin brother Yevgeny, following the death of their mother, were brought to New York by their father Semyon, born in the Ukraine, born to Jewish parents. And then we have the New York Times, who described last week, QAnon, a baseless but sprawling pro-Trump conspiracy theory which began online in 2017 and has since attracted thousands of followers, bringing what researchers call a cult and what the, quote, the FBI says is a potential domestic terror threat into the offline world. The New York Times wrote that statement. The FBI Freedom of Information Act denied that is the case. So the FBI did not call Q a potential domestic terror threat. More media lies. And there's enough of it, even in this show. And this is all they have left now. Spread lies. We have to keep calling them out, because we are winning the information war heavily now. And they're making, yet again, statement with no fact. All very copy and paste, isn't it? Same people as why. Before we go into another music break, here's a list of what has happened in the last week or so. Largely in America, but some other places. For those who say nothing is happening. I've already covered much in the news previously, but here goes. Chinese telecommunications conglomerate Huawei and subsidiaries have been charged in racketeering, conspiracy and conspiracy to steal trade secrets. Jussie Smollett indicted with 6 charges for his hoax of hate crimes. In my opinion, he should receive the same sentence as a homophobic attacker would, and also the same sentence as a racist attacker would receive, plus an additional period of time for the damage he has done to the people in terms of our coming together. And that is something in line with the despicable white supremacist group that got mentioned earlier. He should go to jail for 13 to 20 years. The Justice Department has launched a legal assault to roll back sanctuary cities. Attorney General Barr announced that Giuliani had turned over to them investigative information about Ukraine corruption with the former administration. Trump went on a Twitter spree highlighting that nothing has ever happened to the crimes of Tony Podesta, or Pedosta, real term. Trump then also torched the corrupt Judge Berman Jackson about injustices about Paul Manafort, but questioned why they give Hillary Clinton a free pass. Michael Avenatti has been found guilty of all his charges. He of the slapper and fake charges against Trump. Roger Stone's sentencing has been evaluated by Attorney General Barr as being outrageous. He said 9 years for lying to Congress when rape is only 3 to 5, and the 4 corrupt Mueller investigators all resigned. And then he said, I'm here to announce the indictment of Chinese military for hacking and for breaking into the computer systems of Equifax and stealing sensitive personal information of nearly half of all American citizens. Trump then fired Alexander Vindman, just mentioned. Trump fired Gordon Sondland. And the Trump National Security Council removed 70 former Obama holdovers, with maybe even more coming. Graham sent a letter to Attorney General William Barr last Friday asking that he make 17 officials, many of whom are identified only by title, available for interviews. Durham scrutinising John Brennan's handling of the Russian interference in 2016. Attorney General Barr has now installed an outside prosecutor to review the case against General Flynn. And amid turmoil in the Roger Stone case and a refusal to charge Andrew McCabe at the USAO-DC, the Attorney General has sent outside prosecutors to review politically sensitive cases also. But nothing's happening. Hi all and welcome back. We're going to, as if what we've delivered is not enough, we've got some intel as well. Now, I'm going to read out a portion of what I read out before from Russia with Love last week, because it then goes into my Patreon and the transcripts rather than it being housed on the From Russia with Love up and coming book in the later in the year. So we've reported last Thursday that there was a fair few firings going on globally, particularly in financial circles, and we mentioned IMF. All is connected. More will follow. And then, of course, the Wuhan coronavirus outbreak, and about it being the only housed next to the only biosafety level 4 facility. And then we went into what was a convenient distraction. It's all vaccine games again. Apparently the UN, from what I heard, are waiting on $800 billion worth of vaccines. So the UN have got a stake in delivering these vaccines out. And so it's a convenient distraction, and the levels of fear porn that are rising on the alt media from Langley-based YouTube channels is fairly sickening at the moment. and it's time, like the coronavirus, is they stick a lime in it, and from limes we go to lemons, because certain people are just a little bit bitter. From fear porn to desperation, and this took place last Thursday and was a worldwide effort to get into the asset bunkers, and the same asset bunkers that were emptied years ago by the very few people, less than one handful, who can actually go in there. And the reason they couldn't get in there is because those assets do not belong to them. All of it belongs to the trust, who will disperse it fairly and equally when the final reign of the dark forces ends. And in essence, it's already ended. But what we have now is stupid minions still following fake gods, and the failed programs are keeping the illusion going. It's gone. Now Switzerland, Bank of England, Indonesia, Russia, Philippines, the Hong Kong, Germany, and predictably New York were the locations. And what took place is some paramilitary groups escorted the chosen ones to these areas, and their access was denied. Now there were a few casualties, unfortunately, in the Philippines, because they stepped into the wrong spot. Like I've said, only certain humans can survive in those regions, and in particular in the Golden Column. And none of their ilk have the essence to survive in or near to it. None. I guess they just don't listen, or just too stupid and blinded by their fake titles and self-appointed chosen one statuses. Doesn't work anymore. So what happened was they went into a temple, which is a sacrifice centre, that you have to pass through to get into that particular bunker, and that temple is occupied by the others. Others are non-human, and the temple occupied by the others are refugees who got stuck near that particular column, and they've been there a fairly long time, as it is said that most of them escaped to there after the Mars War. That was last week's. This week's clowns are stealing free weapons from the Ukraine, ex-KGB weapons, on the promise that money will come to them every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, and predictably no money arrives. 13 years and counting they've been doing that. Even though at the same time there are people in your same clown people in America and China who are making billions a year on free opium. It's a bit like the free oil in the Middle East, in Iraq. Free opium. Just stealing it. Via what was known as the Falcon Trust. Next item. The Delarue printing house, owned by the Rothschildians, that took over for AB Corp money printers, who are owned by the Brown Eagle family of the Black Sun, and that company are formerly known as the American Bank Note Company. Anyway, their stock has fallen due to others moving away from the printing house, because they got caught double printing, also known as super notes, on behalf of several countries such as Venezuela, Zimbabwe, China, Bolivia and Argentina. Now the mainstream media did report it, but they're only reporting Venezuela. Why? Because Venezuela have recently signed a new contract with Russia. Now, expect more in the coming months to be exposed for this super note crime, including America, for double and even triple printing of USD allocations. The Federal Reserve printing plates and currency paper has been used by De La Rue for over the last few years and have been making duplicated serial numbered notes. AB Corp still holds the contract to print bonds and birth certificates as well as other government instruments. They also facilitated the overprinting of historical, which is now hysterical, bonds in cooperation with agencies that are run also by the Black Sun in countries such as China, the United States, United Kingdom, Mexico and several other countries. Hence the hysterical bonds like the Black Eagle bond, which is linked to the Black Eagle Trust, which is where Leo Wanta and his agency pals stole billions from the former Soviet Union. In fact, it was trillions. Golden Gun and several others exposing who they printed them for, including massive overprinting of the ruble during the fake Cold War. Now, the Cold War was a fake program to generate vast funds from the government and the people to allow them then to loot the Soviet Union of all of their considerable assets that have been stored there from a very long time back. No, Russians were not coming to get Americans. Rogue Americans in rogue agencies went after the Russian wealth and stole it all. Yes, you, Mr. Wanta. Not content with that, the mention of war means banks can print bonds. Bonds are IOUs, and then they make the people pay again in terms of national debt to pay these bonds back. Now, this has, in a lot of cases, been ended, and the rest still operating will end soon as well. This is something that I read out a while back, and it's time to re-listen because it may be indicative. 18 US code, the S squiggle symbol sign 2385, called the overthrow of the government. Whoever knowingly or willfully advocates, abets, advises or teaches the duty, necessity, desirability or propriety of overthrowing or destroying the government of the United States or the government of any state, territory, district or possession thereof, or the government of any political subdivision therein, by force or violence, or by the assassination of any officer of any such government, or whoever with intent to cause the overthrow or destruction of any such government prints, publishes, edits, issues, circulates, sells, distributes, or publicly displays any written or printed matter advocating, advising, or teaching the duty, necessity, desirability, or propriety of overthrowing or destroying any government in the United States by force or violence, or attempts to do so, or whoever organizes or helps or attempts to organize any society, group, or assembly of persons who teach, advocate, or encourage the overthrow or destruction of any such government by force or violence, or becomes or is a member of or affiliates with any such society, group, or assembly of persons, knowing the purposes thereof, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years, or both, and shall be ineligible for employment by the United States or any department or agency thereof, for the 5 years next following his conviction. If 2 or more persons conspire to commit any offence named in this section, each shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years, or both, and shall be ineligible for employment by the United States or any department or agency thereof for the 5 years next following their conviction. As used in this section, the term organisers and organise with respect to any society, group, or assembly of persons, including the recruitment of new members, hello AOC, the forming of new units, and the regrouping or expansion of existing clubs, classes, and other units of such society, group, or assembly of persons. Now, the squiggle S symbol sign is described as the area sign, Unicode, U plus 0087, and the double S segment sign. And this is a typographical character utilised essentially to allude to a specific segment of an archive, for example, a lawful code. But who wrote the code? Now, it's also additionally called a twofold S and sectional image. Twofold S, that is SS. Oops. So it's all there, Mr. Trump. The agencies, the Treasury, the Fed, elements of the military, foreign nationals and dual citizen agents, Democrats and the media are all complicit in attempting to overthrow the government. TikTok. Final piece of intel, and again a further sign of their desperation. A message was sent to Kim this week, and quote, "Life would be better if you would just turn it over to us and quit," unquote. That would be a no. All life would be better if you gained a single ounce of common sense. Your time of harvesting the people's money is over, and you all had a nice jolly time at our expense with your fake treaties and non-compete deals. Those days are over. Those days were over 5 years before Kim took over that job. As the all-hail Hydra man cut you all off. Not Kim. He did it. Where was your bitching and whining then? Oh, I forgot. He promised you all an RV. Not a motorhome. No, some fake currency revaluation, or regurgitated vomit, as I like to call it. And gave you all fake pieces of paper to prove it. dinars, sims, etc., etc., except it was all a lie. All of which you all fell for. And as the Rothschilds man said to you all, it was carrots for jackasses. Kim is not turning anything over to you. Remember, you were all, in part, in charge of the trust before Kim, and what did you do with it? You stole and cheated it, down to pure greed. The trust is for the needy, not the greedy. So quit your whining and come and share in the trust. Come and help us to help you and help the all, not controlling it or harvest it for the few. That is over. Get used to it and grow up. You're acting like spoiled children. Us quit? You're fooling yourself. Hi all and welcome back. Just quit. No. Life would be better if you quit following fake gods who are no longer alive for a start, and old programs that don't work anymore, which this show host said as far back as 2013. Oh well. There's one real big piece of exposure that is like a mini From Russia with Love piece. That's going to connect an awful lot of dots. But first, before we get to that, the coronavirus. Before people start saying, I'm not covering it. Of course, we mentioned earlier, it was near the lab. And then they went into the media distraction pieces of closing down cruise ships that again provided no verification of any facts. And then we have videos of Gestapo-style Chinese police, except they're not police, they're mercenaries, rounding up people, generally older people, and brutalising them to force vaccines. It's ugly, desperate, and indicative of their world. Like I said, they're losing the narrative. But here's some real facts. Not statements. Facts. Did you know the authorities who are pushing vaccines refused to do a study of illnesses between those vaccinated and those not? Point blank refused in a recent high-level meeting. What are they hiding? Did you know if you vaccinate people and then give them the coronavirus after the vaccine, people die on the spot? Fact. Did you know they are using the same swing the pendulum method they used on seeding the population with psychedelic drugs? Is it psyche or psycho drugs? And the highs and lows of wrecking creational beings drugs is now being replicated in pharma drugs. A vaccine produces a high via your immune system, and then the tablets like Valium et al. Produces a shutdown of your immune system, swinging from one side to the other. Tonight I'm going to highlight the plight of the real Jewish people, where references to this information is extremely thin on the ground, despite the fact the media being run by the people largely presenting themselves as Jewish. And this is in part a report. Like I said, I struggled to find any evidence of it, but I know it exists, because I've spoken to people in Israel who are, their people are suffering immense poverty. CNN will tell you that. And we also have a solution of how to fix it as well. The reasons are multiple. For one thing, the cost of living in Israel is extremely high, and a lot of Israelis simply don't have the purchasing power to afford even the basic necessities. All that wealth, let alone the luxuries that many of us take for granted. During the winter, for people in Israel, many Israelis have to choose between heating or eating. This is not a choice anyone should have to make. Another reason is that Israel has to spend a disproportionate amount of money to defend itself from its many enemies. I'll have comments on that later. If not for the security situation, the Jewish state would have billions more shekels to fund social programs and help the indigent. I'm sure that most of Israel's politicians would prefer to spend taxpayers' money to give more financial aid to the poor rather than spending it on new anti-missile systems and blowing up terrorist tunnels. But alas, Israel's very existence is still under threat, and as long as that is the case, Israel will have to continue spending large sums of money defending itself. Poverty doesn't affect all sectors of Israeli society the same way. As I've already mentioned, children and seniors make up a large portion of Israel's poor people. Nearly 1 in 3 Israeli children live below the poverty line. 1 in 3 Israeli children, as do about 1 in 5 seniors. But poverty is also concentrated amongst certain other groups in society. It is the highest amongst the country's Arab and Haredi citizens. Almost half of Israeli Arabs are poor, and more than 40% of Haredim also. The former make up a disproportionate number of Israel's poor, in large part because Arabs simply have less job opportunities available to them in their communities, and they may also be victims of discrimination when they apply for work. In addition, many Arab women are discouraged from seeking employment for cultural reasons. All very godly, that, isn't it? And many of the Haredim are poor because they don't have jobs. That's what's happening in Israel. Let's go to San Francisco. The statistics are a stark reminder that the issue is widespread and growing. 45% of children in Jewish homes are living in poor or near poor households. Between 16 and 20% of these households are earning less than $30,000, with 7% making less than $15,000. These are not statistics that show uniform wealth. In fact, while some of the most dire cases are, not surprisingly, in retirement age and elderly people, young adults are also amongst those who are affected. Jewish poverty is a significant issue that deserves urgent attention, and there is so much more we can do to uplift the most vulnerable members of our community. New York. Oh my. New York City and the surrounding region has the largest number of low-income Jewish households in the United States and is an outlier when compared to the ranges included above. It's now 9 years since they produced data because it's got worse. But we'll go on the 2011 data. 20% of individuals in Jewish households in New York lived in a household with an income below 150% of the federal poverty level, accounting for 361,000 individuals. You can see why they won't update the data. So that's the report. My input into it: why won't the Jewish-based media cover this? And this is another example of people not looking after their own people, is it not? Yes, all will blame the other colours for their plight, but I see zero evidence of any colour as a collective group looking after each other, never mind other colours. And this is the problem. This is what the TPC is trying to correct, where we look after each other. And what this also proves is my From Russia with Love series is correct. These so-called Jewish people who have vast amounts of wealth will sit by and watch their own people suffer and struggle, just like they did in World War II, when they refused to help the Jewish people in camps or otherwise. And yes, that is a fact. There was 2 attempts, one by Hitler and another meeting with the Rothschilds to let the Jewish people out of the camps and put them in Palestine. Both were refused by Jewish people. And then you have snakes. Whether the lizardy snakes is another matter. Still a snake. Eli Wiesel, or Weasel, probably the correct term, who charges people $25,000 and demands a limousine to speak to people. People like the Rothschilds, the Sacklers, the Soros Group, Silverstein, Weinberg, to name just a few. Why don't they put their hands in their pockets and take these people out of poverty? There's a vast amount in the media, politicians, and in the film industry, all with fake names to cover up that they're actually Jewish. Been going on since World War II. Why don't they help their own people? So here's a solution to fix the Jewish poverty. The best solution to solving the Jewish people's plight is to close down the fake Holocaust Museum in New York in particular, which was arranged before the Jewish people died, I might add, and yes, that is a fact, and give the in excess of $50 million a year that they collect and give it directly to the Jewish communities. Or close down the AIPAC centres and the monies donated to them also going to the Jewish people. Or stop sending aid to a hostile country that doesn't spend aid on the people, only on weaponry, violence and propaganda. Israel has no enemies. All of them were created as a divide and conquer program to harvest vast quantities of wealth off of everyone. And the sooner people realise this, the better, none more so than the Jewish people themselves. You're being used and had been used as pawns for these harvesters. Absolutely shocking. The sheer wealth of the Jewish population, given their demographics are so low, and their own people are living in abject poverty. Snakes, a lot of them. A couple of things came up. Some have asked, why was there only 2 expenditures that came out of the People's Club last year? Because only 2 people asked us why. Both of which I kind of initiated. But it's also, given the workload I had last year, and it's not getting any better this year, I didn't spend too much time on operating or highlighting the positive aspect of the People's Club, but it also allowed us to build up a small amount in the bank for future expenditures. And some of your money has helped one person stay in their home in this past month, and another with a medical emergency. And this is what it's all about, helping each other. Also, what came up is some have asked why I don't do Q&A anymore. There are questions that people like to ask that whereby they want to learn something, and then you have questions with statements, questions designed to create mischief. But the real reason why the Q&A section is no longer in the show is that the members themselves requested to end it due to people asking leading or stupid questions. But what is ironic, though, is those who send others into the group to ask leading questions were offered a show to ask all of their questions, and predictably, like cowards that they are, declined. You see, with some people it's not answers they want, it's only mischief laden with an agenda. But the greatest question you can ask is why an investigation group won't ask their lead suspect any questions. Oh my, it's all very Fisher-Price spike hits that to me. Now, unfortunately, recently we've had to remove 3 people from our group. 2 listed themselves as inspirational speakers, charging people thousands of dollars, when this show has given many people inspiration and charged nothing. Perhaps that is their trigger. They used people to harvest their energy to fund their rather expensive lifestyles. This show or host will never do that. Now, the other was related to banking. Came across all nice, but his energy eventually gave him away. All 3 are now in the copy and paste group. I just love it when the masked crusaders are unmasked and expose themselves for who and what they are. Now, this was expected, as the more work we do that has impact, the more they send out their minions. And that particular group's expanding members of various levels of criminality, wrong paths and pure evil are indicative of a wider thing playing out currently. You know, there are times when both Kim and I both wish we'd not been involved with or a part of the trust. Because at times it just gives a majority of people an opportunity to dissolve their own responsibility, full of ideas and critique of what should or hasn't been done, or what other people should do for their benefit. but zero input on solutions to fixing the problem, except critiquing and slandering the ones who do try. All those questions have been answered, but like I said, these people don't want answers. They just want to throw accusations in via statements to cover up their own agenda and their own lack of responsibility. And essentially what is playing out here is we have a new version of haves and have-nots. But it's not wealth this time, but personal responsibility. The two words that this show embodies more than most: personal responsibility. Those that have it stand out. Those that don't critique and attack you. But everyone being responsible for their own future and others should be participating in the $1 a week or $1 a month or whatever else you can afford, because we can fix up this ourselves, with or without the trust. It's a simple plan that everyone can afford to contribute to, that fixes the issues that people want fixing, not waiting for governments. Waiting for governments has always been pointless. You all know that by now. And clearly the cabal are terrified of that plan, because it can be done. And so they send criminals and bitter people out to discredit it and me. Yes, the trust is the easier option. Money just lands due to the work of a few people. But the $1 program is built up by the work of the many, which is more beneficial for the elevation of the people. And for the benefit of the hard of hearing and agenda-driven, non-thinking people, that is not me sliding away from the trust, far from it. I've invested thousands of hours into the trust for no pay, and a whole heap of abuse to boot that went along with it, as has Kim. And we will continue to do so in spite of the time-wasting critics. But I would like to build the foundation of we the people with the $1 program, and then enhance it with the trust funds. We did warn of it on this show many years back, of the masks falling. People would expose themselves and each other, and that is bearing out in that group and inside our own group as well, I might add, much to my disappointment. It is and will get more ugly, as all these people have not faced up to their own failures, wrongdoings and dark sides, and continue to project at others, envious of their transparency, integrity and truth. Envy is a terrible disease. Reality for them and others is they are now pretending to hide behind masks that just don't exist anymore, and it becomes almost comedic in their attempts to project the false image. It doesn't work anymore, and people can see them for who they are or what they have become. Those that project the loudest are the very ones with more to cover up. So keep shouting, whilst we keep laughing and continue to stand in truth with full confidence in our open and transparent policy, whilst they choose to hide from reality. Hi all, and welcome back. This next piece is fairly detailed and is reminiscent of chapters in From Russia with Love. And the more you look into what went on in the past, sadly the same group crop up again, time and time and time again. And this is no different. So we're going to delve into the world of nuclear physicists, chemists, and bio-research. And I'm going to start with Samuel Abraham Goudsmit. Goudsmit is a shortened version of Goldsmith, which will tell the origin of his religion. Born to Jewish parents, born in Holland. An all too familiar path of these Jewish descent peoples coming from around the world and obtaining top positions and largely in very nefarious programs that harms people. Now Samuel moved to America and was quickly stationed directly into MIT. But he was also involved elsewhere, as this piece shows. He was scientific head of the Alsos mission and successfully reached the German group of nuclear physicists around Werner Heisenberg and Otto Hahn at Hechingen, which was then a French zone, and the advance of the French physicist Yves Rocard, who had previously succeeded in recruiting German scientists to come to France. Alsos was involved in the Manhattan nuclear program, and he stated the Germans were never close to an atomic weapon, as the Nazi scientists had a lack of understanding of how to engineer an atomic bomb. Or could it be because of people like Mr. Goudsmit, all defected to America via Operation Paperclip, which was the second phase of that event, not the first. Paperclip in 1947 was the second phase, which is not as well known by most historians. The OSS were doing paperclip since the days of Tesla. And that final operation in 1947 involved 250,000 flights to and from America and Germany. 250,000 flights. Can you imagine the sheer cost of that operation alone? You bear in mind, America had barely come out of recession, and yet they couldn't fund 250,000 flights between America and Germany with some psychopathic scientists. Now, predictably, Mr. Goudsmit is also involved in Egyptology. The Samuel A. Goudsmit collection of Egyptian antiquities resides at the Kelsey Museum of Archaeology at the University of Michigan. All very Sackler family to me. Otto Hahn was another of these nuclear physicists, also Jewish, to which he and the authorities went to great lengths to cover it up, it is said. Involved in advanced science of messing around with isotopes that too few understood back then, and was part of the Kaiser Wilhelm Group in 1906. That group was funded in part by the Rockefellers using the Students' Program. Oops. That same program was later used by the CIA as a means to create spies or collect people of profiled interest under the National Education Act. You would think that was all to do with teaching. No. It's actually called the National Defence Education Act, ran by the military and the agencies under the banner of protecting Americans from Russians. Well, the Russians never came, and perhaps now a new National Teaching Act needs to be drafted that is not run by the war machine. But militaries running education programs is pure fascism. Just saying. And part of the dumbing down process here in America, as they wouldn't want properly taught soldiers going onto a battlefield and working out why they are really there, would they? No. All follow orders now and don't question what we tell you. That's the program. Just like school. The Kaiser Wilhelm Institute and its research facilities were involved in weapons research, experimentation and production in both the First World War and the Second World War. During World War I, the group, and in particular Fritz Haber, was responsible for introducing the use of poison gas as a weapon, which was in direct violation of established international law. During World War II, some of the weapons and medical research performed by the KWI, Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, was connected to fatal experimentation on living test subjects in concentration camps. In fact, members of the KWI anthropology department, particularly Ottomar von Verschuer, received preserved Jewish bodies for study and display from Auschwitz. They won't tell you that in the Holocaust Museum, will they? Why? Because it was their own people involved in it, as we will see. Who provided those live and dead, in part Jewish bodies? None other than Dr. Greed himself, Joseph Mengele, who, despite stating publicly he hates Jews and they should all be exterminated, was, funny enough, surrounded by them in these programs. Does that make any sense? Jews doing hideous experimenting on Jews. And this is why it is important to grasp and understand the From Russia with Love series. Mengele and his Nazi Germany, as it is labelled, attempted to obtain this new territory by attacking Poland and the Soviet Union, Prussia and Russia, intending, quote, to deport or kill the Jews and Slavs living there, who were considered by the Nazis to be inferior to the Aryan master race, unquote. Neglecting the fact that the Russians and the Slavs were the Aryan race, both then and the past. Again, I ask, does that make any sense whatsoever? Now, Otto Hahn spent his 3rd and 4th semesters studying under Adolf von Baer at the University of Munich. And in 1901, oh dear, under the Rothschild family, Bayer, Adolf Bayer was a descendant of the Jewish family of Itzigs, Itzigs, and the original of which was Daniel Itzig. Daniel was the court Jew to Kings Frederick II the Great and Frederick William II of Prussia. Itzig was a banker and a mint master in partnership with Vital Hein Ephraim. Vital Hein Ephraim, who was also Jewish, were making fake coins together to debase the economies of the connected countries. Sound familiar? Ephraim and his companion Itzig became infamous for adding copper up to 70% into fake coins known as Ephraimitin, and the coin fraud of the entrepreneurs became an existential element of war financing. It always goes into war, doesn't it? Well, what you got to remember is the coins back then, in fact up until 1964, were largely made of silver, all silver. And no doubt they collected all the silver as well and lined their own pockets even further. And yes, certain mints around the world, like the Canadian one, are still doing it, or were. Now together they leased all the mints in Saxony and Prussia, and during the 7 Years' War they assisted Frederick the Great in debasing the Saxonian currency and spreading the Ephraimitin not only in Saxony but in Silesia, Poland, Bohemia and Courland. All very Rothschilds and De La Rue company, that to me. Now, as a side note, and is supportive of From Russia with Love, the term Ephraim said to be Jewish, but it's not. Ephraim was, according to the book of Genesis, the second son of Joseph and Asenath. Now, Asenath was an Egyptian woman who the Pharaoh gave to Joseph as his wife, and was the daughter of Potipharah, a priest of On. Here we go with the priest class again. Ephraim was actually born in Egypt. Listen closely. Before the arrival of the children of Israel from Canaan. Interesting line. The children of Israel from Canaan, not the country of Israel. The real words for that, or real line, is the children of the house of Israel from Canaan. I was looking at a fairly old map recently, this week. There was a place that is quite close to Syria called Israel, Izreel, which may be where that house resided, but nowhere near modern-day Jerusalem, which is much further south and west of Israel. Now, Hahn had a counterpart to this experimentation and building nuclear fusion for weaponry. Lisa Meitner, an Austrian born to Jewish nobility, under the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, and she later went on to become an assistant to another known person involved in these practices called Max Planck. Max Planck, also Jewish, also involved in nefarious practices, experimenting on how radiation would affect the body in what is known as the Black Body Radiation Program. Planck went on to establishing himself as the quantum-based theory for which he is now known as, but he was also a participant of propaganda or propaganda back in 1914. Let's see if you can see the similarities to now. The Manifesto of the 93 is the name commonly given to an October 4th, 1914 proclamation, originally titled in English, "To the Civilized World" by professors of Germany. Remember, Planck was Jewish, not German. That was endorsed, it is said, by 93 prominent German scientists, scholars, and artists, declaring their unequivocal support of German military actions in the early period of World War I. These actions elsewhere were called the Rape of Belgium. Now, the manifesto galvanized support for the war through German schools and universities, but many foreign intellectuals were outraged. Told you it'd sound familiar, didn't it? All very US military and the CIA, that to me. But the comparisons are eerie, are they not? That was all staged, that document, as it came to light later that most who signed it didn't know what it contained or were unaware of its intentions. But one of those who did sign it and knew exactly what it was Alfred von Baer. No surprise there. But it was also signed, knowingly, by Albert Einstein. Oops. Another involved in this underground nuclear fusion and people experimentation program. Of course, Albert was also Jewish. What may be significant is a piece that was written after World War I that may give pointers to this. Quote, "It is not true that we trespassed in neutral Belgium. It has been proved that France and England had resolved on such a trespass, and it has likewise been proved that Belgium had agreed to their doing so. It would have been suicide on our part not to have preempted this." So what does that say? So the Rothschilds, who control France and England, remember, along with the Dutch Jewish elements that created the fake country now known as Belgium to run their nefarious operations from Brussels, started that war, and they were all in on it. It also said it is not true that the life and property of a single Belgian citizen was injured by our soldiers without the bitterest self-defence having made it necessary. They were trying to stop it, what the French, English and Dutch Jewish elements were doing. But the people who had propaganda ran on them, started shooting at them. That was said at the German leader at that time. Now it's funny, that was World War I. In 1945, just as World War II was coming near an end, the German leader then made similar claims that may get people to understand the propaganda used by the system that goes way further back than Langley and the CIA-based Reuters group. Quote, "It is untrue I or anyone else in Germany wanted war in 1939. It was wanted and provoked solely by international statesmen either of Jewish origin or working for Jewish interests." Unquote. Max Planck helped his nephew, the economist Hermann Cranold, to emigrate to London after his arrest. Hermann Cranold was a member of the Social Democratic Party of Germany and established as a Marxist party in 1875. From Russia with Love covered who Karl Marx is and was. These are the same Social Democrats supported the war in 1914 and were also involved in the Bolshevik Revolution of November 1917 in Russia. Connecting the dots, yeah? Members of the left wing and far left of the SPD formed alternative parties, and the first one was the Spartacus League, and later became known as the Communist Party of Germany. Oops. Incidentally, Adolf Hitler banned this particular party in 1933. I wonder why. Bearing in mind, Adolf Hitler also banned the Teutonic Knights and the Freemasons. Does that make any sense? Something's amiss, isn't it? The Teutonic Knights had defeated the St. Petersburg and Prussia regions of Russia at least twice. And yeah, Hitler was allegedly having to attack Russia. Well, why wouldn't he want the Teutonic Knights who had done it twice previously? Why did he ban them? Why did he ban Freemasonry? And why did he ban a group that was involved in the Bolshevik Revolution of Russia? Does that make any sense? Now, I will repeat for those with short memories or agendas. I'm not at any point suggesting Hitler was good. But what I am questioning is the official narrative and raising the question, not a statement, of was Hitler duped by the hidden elements? Remember, Hitler was not in the top order. That was the Black Eagle. Hitler was in the lower order, the Brown Eagle. And the great question is for people to ponder on. If the nasty Russians and the nasty Germans were defeated in World War I and World War II, and these were such nasty beasts that had to be slayed, with Hitler, Pol Pot, Chairman Mao, Gaddafi, Hussein, and other so-called despots all now gone, The question that remains is, why is the world still in such a mess? Then we come to IG Farben, a collection of chemical, genetics, physics and pharmaceutical companies. BASF, Bayer, Rothschilds again, Hoechst, Agfa and Chemische Fabrik Griesheim Elektron and Chemische Fabrik Worm. They were all accused by the Nazis of being, quote, an international capitalist Jewish company. IG Farben were accused by the Nazis of being an international capitalist Jewish company. A decade later, IG Farben was a Nazi party donor. And after the alleged Nazi takeover of Germany in 1933, IG Farben became a major government contractor providing significant material for the German war effort. For those who are new, Nazi is not German. It is National Zionism. The first two letters, N-A-Z-I. Not German. And they use countries as a front to hide who these people really are. Now, described as the most notorious German industrial concern during the Third Reich, IG Farben relied in the 1940s on slave labour from the concentration camps, including 30,000 from Auschwitz. One of its subsidiaries supplied the poison gas Zyklon B, which actually was delivered by Pope John Paul. That killed over allegedly 1 million people in gas chambers during the Holocaust. Again, it brings up the question of, does this make sense? An international Jewish company involved in using, in some cases, Jewish people as slave labour in camps, and then allegedly poisoning their own people. Something's amiss. Now, my understanding is based on viewing the pictures of the shower rooms presented as evidence of Zyklon B gassing. Actually, it showed zero evidence of Zyklon B being present in those camps named. It's not to say it didn't take place, but not in the camps that they name. Why would they lie? So why is that? Because Zyklon B stains the walls blue. There were no blue walls in those showers. What really happened is those people were not gassed in the camps. They were taken out by Jewish companies into private research labs, the likes of Kaiser Wilhelm and IG Farben, and gassed there for their experimentation. And this is why I've said these particular Jewish people are different. They care not for anyone, never mind their own so-called people. Now, IG Farben are stated to have removed all Jewish employees during the 1930s, and yet over a third of their board were known as Jewish, with more hidden under a smokescreen. It's lies. The sheer fact that Bayer was a large part of that group, confirms that Bayer is Bauer is Rothschilds, who is operating as Jewish but under the banner of the Egyptian Ra and Solomon cults. Solomon was from Egypt, not Israel, and the Rothschilds clan bears the ring of Solomon. So the question remains, given what we mentioned earlier about Jewish poverty, how can a group of people, a fairly small group of people I might add, given the demographics, who we are told have been murdered, persecuted, holocausted and thrown out of several countries, all rise to such prominent ranks of bankers, lawyers, minters, nuclear physicists, chemical warfare, think tank groups, all having the same religion? Again, it doesn't make sense. It's one point arguing against the other. Or how can two women who are Jewish, Lisa Meitner and Marie Curie, who are both Jewish, rise to the higher ranks of business and involved in these experimentation things, while most women were banned from these higher end establishments until well into the next century? Again, does that make any sense? How are these small group of people all in these prominent positions and a high percentage of them doing practices from illegal to pure evil? Why were so many of the prominent Jewish-based people involved in the Manhattan Project? Why were the CIA or predecessors of the CIA also involved in that project? Why have the CIA, who are stated to fight communism globally and yet have never attacked a country synonymous to Zionism, which created communism to begin with, as was stated by one of their own people, Israel Cohen? The final question to be raised is, given the above details, are the CIA actually the real communists, all hidden in plain sight? Maybe President Truman's words in 1963 will help. 16 years after he signed off on the National Security Act of 1947, the same year the now named CIA was set up. Well, like I said earlier, it was not national security for America and its people, but to allow the CIA and other agency-based goons to basically do whatever it wants globally without remit. And this is what President Truman said. During those historic and sometimes tragic 16 years since that act had become law, that he had witnessed changes that disturbed him as he saw that the CIA had been diverted from the original assignment that he and the legislators who drafted the act had so carefully planned. Although even in his time he had seen the beginning of the move of the CIA into covert activities, there can be little doubt that the diversion to which he made reference was not one that he would have attributed to himself or any other president. Rather, the fact that the CIA had gone into clandestine operations and had been injected into peacetime cloak and dagger operations, and has been so much removed from its intended role, was more properly attributable to the growing and secret pressures of, quote, some other power source, unquote. President Truman. And his final quote was, the CIA had become a symbol of sinister and mysterious foreign intrigue, unquote. I guess we've just disturbed the sound of silence. Hi all and welcome back. A somewhat disturbing piece there. And this is why I've said we should never label all the Jewish people. These psychopaths are not people. Not people I recognise anyway. Subhuman. And it all comes under the banner of Zionism. They'll use their religion, Jewish, because of the pro-pagan dart that has been run where you can't criticise anything Jewish. You can't even highlight Jewish poverty. Well, they won't tell you that. Well, our show will. And this is why I do these shows, because the Jewish people have been used as pawns, pushed into settlements so people can shoot at them, whilst the people who then take over the land that the poor Jewish people were pushed into and give them nothing back. This is what's been going on. And I'm glad to see many of the Jewish people are standing up to it. You know, that guy, Seawald, is like a hero to me, exposing the pedophiles in his own community. And we need to expose the pedophiles in all communities and these bankers who are raping everything, figuratively and literally. And it's only with shows like mine and several others that these atrocities are coming to light. This is about saving the Jewish people, not denigrating them. The fact that all these people all have one religion is a pointer. But then they've done it in multiple countries, creating fake religions in Iran, whilst privately still practicing Judaism. I think that was in From Russia with Love 8, I think. They created communism. Communism's got nothing to do with China, nothing to do with Russia or Vietnam, and everything to do with CIA being run by the Zionists and the Black Sun. That's who these people represent. Anti-life. And they've used all the religions, because it all stems from the same people. It all came from the Black Sun. Talmud, anti-human book, morphed into the Torah. The Torah was picked up and Christianized. Then they created a Christian sect called Islam. Then from there it went to Catholic, back to worshipping the cult of Ra again. Out of Catholic became Protestant. But they're not different people. They were Catholics protesting the crimes of the church, which then morphed into another religion. Why? So they can get people to fight each other. Same thing. It's like they're getting the Jewish and the Palestinian people to fight because they've fed the Jewish people a bullshit of lies for decades. the Exodus that went to Jordan, not Palestine. Amman, as was covered in the last show. And the fake British establishments with the Balfours and the Rothschilds again created the fake country known as Israel, like they created the fake country known as Belgium, which is actually South Holland. And you can go on and on and on with creating fake countries like of Monaco and all these other, DC, City of London, which is not part of the UK, the Vatican City, which is not part of Rome or Italy. This is what they've been doing. Or they have like so the Cayman Islands or Bermuda, tax-free, and all their offshore accounts go there. That's what they've been up to. Right, last two pieces for... I thought we would overrun this show. I actually cut 3 pages out. But 231 years ago this month, George Washington was appointed president. He who is held in such high esteem in this country, one of the great founding fathers, we are told, fighting for liberty and justice. But then he said this in a prayer on February the 17th, 1789. Quote, Almighty God, spelt all capital letters, we make our earnest prayer that thou wilt keep the United States in thy holy protection, that thou wilt incline the hearts of the citizens to cultivate a spirit, quote, of subordination and obedience to the government, unquote, and entertain a brotherly affection and love for one another and for their fellow citizens of the United States of America at large. Oh my. Cultivate a spirit of subordination and obedience to the government? Isn't that allegedly what the founding fathers were fighting against? Overly powerful governments. And then this. Entertain a brotherly affection and love for one another. It all sounds very nice, but it's double speak. The brotherly affection is for the Freemasons' fraternal brotherly order, of which he was one of them. Your founding fathers were all British and French Freemasons. Sorry, but that's the truth. And this double speak is kind of like a video I was sent this week by one of the members about the Queen's speech, Queen of England's speech in 1953, which she said in sincerity. 2 words. What is it? And the question that was raised, was it all one word or 2 words? 1 word means the action or practice of pretending to feel something that you do not really feel, or not meaning what you say. 2 words means in honesty. But that is not the correct grammatical based term for that statement, because if it is done in honesty, it should have said in her speech, in all sincerity. In and sincerity combined means dishonesty. And like I've shown in several times in our own shows now, It's all in the words. But their doublespeak is now being decoded, and suddenly the beast is being revealed. Final piece tonight. Some of which I've just said, but there you go. We're getting feedback from several countries and cultures around the world about the From Russia with Love series, including from many people from the countries that were labelled in that series. Like I says, forget the countries. They're not interested in countries, they're just lines on a piece of paper. These people don't understand countries, they just understand evil. And for me, it's important that people in other cultures get what this series is about. And I am appreciative of the feedback from other cultures and not just from a Western perspective either. Long-held beliefs are challenged heavily in that series, and it has got people to stop and think. As more dots connected and the questioning of the official narrative. You, the listener, are tasked with doing your own research on the topics discussed. And what has been borne out is there are several articles supporting the information the way it was relayed in our show, even in tonight's show. And the point is, we've all been duped by these programs, and we have to stop the circle of abuse of pointing fingers at each other. That is just the effect. Pointing directly at the program is the effect it creates, but it's not the cause of it. Zionism is not just Israel, as the series has shown. It is a global problem done by elements of society that over 99% of the people have no idea who they are or what they represent. In fact, very few outside of THI are aware. It's the Illuminati, they cry, the bloodline families, it's the deep state, all of which play a role, but their role is actually minuscule compared to those who orchestrate these things in the dark. Tiny puppets, deep state as well. And Western people are too brainwashed into let's blame the Muslim or Islam, forgetting Muslim was a Christian sect. So let's blame the Christians, forgetting Christendom came out of the Torah. So let's blame the Jews, as they followed the Torah, forgetting the Torah is a watered down book that was given to the Jewish people. Who gave it to them? 99.99% of people on this planet have no idea. The fake gods. Whilst the anti-human book, the Talmud, was kept largely hidden of who wrote it or who operated it, who sold it off as a Jewish-based book. It's not Jewish. Because when you go back to the original timeline, Hebrews are nothing to do with Jews or Jewish people. Let's have a little bit more word magic, shall we? Hebrew means one from the other side. Oh dear. There are so many connotations and meanings. But for those who have listened to my series will recognise the implications of the one from the other side. Now we can all go round and round in a circle pointing fingers at each other, or we can step away from the programme and realise that is the effect only. The cause of these issues and ills is the program itself. That program involves all of them. That program is religion. Final song tonight is popular, I imagine, with many members, until you know and understand this hidden meaning as well. The Hebrews, the one from the other side, worshipped Lilith, and many variants of the Jewish people today still do, but perhaps this will make some ponder. Lilith, evil female spirit in medieval Hebrew folklore, was the first wife of Adam, not Eve. From Hebrew Lilith, from Akkadian Lilitu, which is connected by folk etymology with the Hebrew word for night and moon, Layla. Layla, you got me on my knees and begging, darling, please. All bow and beg to the entity of the night, which is the moon and Lilith and the Dark Mother. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams, and it's bye for now.